Hello, today we're going to be learning about the cell and its structure. So at first glance, when you look at a cell, it can be very confusing. There are lots of different parts to it that make the structure work. You can almost compare the cell to a factory. In some respects, the eukaryotic cell is much like a living version of a modern factory. There are different organelles of the cell that can be compared to specialized machines and assembly lines of the factory. Um, if you follow an assembly line, you know that it takes a lot of different parts to put a whole thing together. So as we look through the organization of a cell, we're going to see plenty of places where we can compare work, and that will help us understand how cells work. First, you have the nucleus. Let's take a look at the nucleus. Now, in the same way that the main office controls a large factory, the nucleus is the control of a cell. The nucleus is going to contain all of the cell's DNA, and with it, the coded instructions for making proteins and other important materials. Prokaryotic cells do not have a nucleus, but they do have DNA that is located within the organism, and it has the same kind of instructions. The nucleus is surrounded by a nuclear envelope and it's composed of two membranes. The nuclear envelope has thousands and thousands of little pores which let materials move in and out of the nucleus. These are just more pictures of nucleus. You can see the chromosomes on the bottom, which carry the cell's genetic information. They're also found within the nucleus. Most of the time, these thread-like chromosomes are spread throughout the nucleus, and they form a chromatin. It's a complex of DNA-bound proteins. So when the cell divides, its chromosomes will condense, and you'll see it under a microscope. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the cytoskeleton. Now, the cytoskeleton is very important because, let's see, back to the factory building. That's the support, that's the steel or the cement beams and the columns that hold up the walls and the roof. So in eukaryotic cells, they're given shapes, and the internal organization is done by these protein filaments, and that is called the cytoskeleton. So it's the outside layer that supports the structure. There are certain parts of the cytoskeleton that also help transport material between different parts of the cell, almost like a conveyor belt that carries material from one part of a factory to another. So you can also see that cytoskeletons have microtubules, which are hollow protein tubes, and then they have microfilaments that are both there for structural purposes. So now within the cytoplasm, we have different organelles. The cytoplasm itself is a liquid. It's the material inside of the cell. It's made of water and different salts, and it contains all the organelles. Organelles are the little organs that make up the cell. You also have ribosomes. Ribosomes are very important because they are made of RNA and protein. They're going to assemble protein following the code that you get from the nucleus. So here you can just see this is a picture that was taken under a microscope. Let's talk a little bit about the endoplasmic reticulum, or the ER. Eukaryotic cells contain an internal membrane system, and that's known as the ER. It's a bunch of lipid or fat layers that have proteins and other materials that are exported from the cell. The portion of the endoplasmic reticulum that is involved in making the protein is called a rough ER. It is given the name because there are ribosomes that are found on its surface. And then you have the smooth ER that does not contain these ribosomes. Here's just a little animated picture that shows you what the ER looks like. So again, it's an internal membrane system, and that's where the proteins are made and modified. You have other organelles such as the Golgi apparatus, which packages and it ships materials throughout the body. And then you have lysosomes, which break down the carbohydrates that we intake, and it cleans up all the dead organelles that are in the cell. Then you have the vacuoles. These store the food and water for cells to use. Now, these are just pictures of various Golgi apparatus, the lysosome structure. In this picture, do you see a vacuole? Okay, so how does a cell get its energy? You have something called a mitochondria within the cell, and this is found in both the animal and the plant cell. Its main purpose is to break down glucose to release energy. Chloroplasts are only found in plant cells, and they're the organelles that convert sunlight into glucose through what we will get into later, photosynthesis.